Hi, I'm Scott Starrett with Starrett Wealth Management. Happy to be here again with another short-ish video. We have a guest today, and our guest is Carmen McHale. Carmen works just the office next to me at Canaccord Genuity. Carmen just joined us from a major accounting firm here recently, and her role is the estate planning advisor, one of the two for Alberta. And her focus really through 2 decades of planning and experience has been translating sophisticated tax and estate concepts to meaningful real world solutions. So she really works with people that are looking at transitioning through various life's challenges and goals and focuses. And so today I thought I would bring her on to talk about everybody's favorite topic, which is taxation and how taxes kind of work into the plan. So we'll get right to it. Carmen, you know, what do you do? And when I say that, not only what do you do, day to day and things, but what kind of got you interested in this sort of planning?
Well, I started out in accounting way back when computers were just kind of becoming a thing. And I love the technical part. I love numbers, but by the time I was looking at those numbers, it already happened. All of the decisions had been made. And I wanted to be looking forward when we can make choices and actually shape the outcome. So after I did accounting for about 8 years and then a little stint selling oil and gas software, I got into financial planning really through Investors Group, and they really did focus on financial planning, which I knew from the beginning that was going to be something that I loved doing. And early on, I sat with a couple who they came in scared, right? This is back in, early 2000s after the tech bubble had burst, you know, and financial planning wasn't as common, I guess, to say as it is now. And they had done everything right on paper, but they had never seen it all in one place. And they were carrying so much anxiety about whether or not they were going to be okay, especially after a major market correction. So, 2 meetings later, they walked out with a plan they trusted, and it really changed the whole tone of the relationship. And that's really the job. 25 years later, it has not changed. It's still my favorite part. A good plan is not a stack of numbers, it really is peace of mind. And my job is to help a family or business owner go from worry they carry around to a plan that they can point to on paper.
Great. Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, our practice does a lot of planning for people, and we see it as one of the focuses and pillars of, any good, um, you know, forward-looking kind of transition piece going forward. What do what are, when you look at the planning process, and in particular around the tax side of it, what are some of the must-haves? And I'm going to separate it for business owners and non-business owners, because I think in some ways there may be a little bit of a different, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a little bit of a different focus between the two, or more complexity sometimes. But what are some of the must-haves that each of those groups should have?
Yeah, and I think apart even from the tax side, there's some fairly basic things that come up almost every engagement I go into. And really, there's a few questions that I'm going to ask a client. If they know them, we can build from that. If they don't, that's where we start. So, biggest one is, do you know how much your life actually costs? If you don't know how much your burn rate is and not a guess, a real number, everything in the plan, how much you can spend in retirement, how much you can give away, how much that we're taking out of your corporation after tax, can your plan sustain? And so if you don't know how much you actually spend, that is going to be the biggest determination of your long-term financial success. If you spend, I'd rather go high on expenses rather than lower. And then if you don't spend that much, great. The other thing is what if something happened tomorrow? Is all your paperwork ready? Do you have a current will? Do you have current powers of attorney? Are your beneficiary designations lined up with your will? Because most of the estate messes I see, they're not about tax. They're about documents that were never updated after maybe a marriage breakdown, or, just circumstances change and they just were never revisited. I meet with so many couples that, their kids are long gone and off the payroll, shall we say, and they updated their will when their first child was born. So the other thing is, do you know what you own and where it lives? Especially working with some family trusts, for example, I have a number of clients I've worked with over the years that they think they own a certain asset, but it's actually in their family trust. And so getting everything down on paper is a big part of the plan and a real big benefit for your executors and your heirs, because often people have multiple institutions they're dealing with. They may have insurance policies they bought, 25 years ago. And if something happens to them, nobody actually can find anything and assets get missed. And have the conversation with the people your plan will affect, your spouse, your adult child, your executors. One that lives only in your head or locked up in your drawer is not going to help anybody. Some of the most valuable meetings I run are the ones where an adult child sits down for the first time. And as we say, mom and dad open the kimono. So they finally get an idea of what they're going to have to be managing eventually. And for business owners, shareholder agreements. If you are in partnership with more than one business owner, you need an agreement in place, and it needs to be one that you actually read in the last few years, not the one in the drawer for when you started the company. Your business evolves, partners come and go, and that document is usually not kept up. A written thought on who takes over and how. I meet with so many clients, especially men, and their 70s even, who they're never going to die, so everything's going to be fine. But what happens when you're not there to run the business anymore? Who takes over? What does it look like? How is it funded? It really needs to be a decision that's made before it has to be. And somebody quietly running the tax numbers on what does that look like on the day the business changes hands? And is that tax funded? So do you have insurance if it's needed? What's your corporate structure? These are all just tools to manage that number, but you can't use the tools if nobody's done the math. And most successions do not fail because of tax. They fail because these conversations were never had.
So, I mean, you talk about, let's just stick with the business side for a sec. You talk about, um, being prepared and things like that and funding things and stuff. But I mean, look, reality in Canada, can we really do anything? I mean, what's the use of a plan? Because we're all going to pay so much tax anyway. I mean, this is something that I hear is, look, there's no breaks anymore. You can't go offshore, you can't use structures, you can't do this, you can't do that. So really, what's the use of doing it? Like, how have you? Like, do you actually save people money by
Oh,
doing these things? Like,
absolutely.
and or does it just cost them a whole bunch of money in professional fees? Because that's one of the things that you get is, oh well, but my accountant, lawyer, and stuff. Oh, this is going to cost thousands of dollars all in. Really, at the end, am I going to save the money? Because it's a small business, and I'm giving it to the kids anyway, or the kids are just going to wrap it up. I mean, how would you say? What would you say to that?
Well, I'll give you an example of where you can be proactive and you can save money. It will cost some professional fees, but I can tell you those will be a lot less than the tax you would pay by not doing something. And so, an example is, let's say you've got a company, and let's say it's just a holding company. You've got a bunch of real estate in it that's growing, and maybe an investment portfolio. So, over time, assuming everything's managed the way it should be, that's going to grow in value. So you may be 65 right now, and let's say your company's worth 5 million. Well, if you just let it keep growing, then guess what? On estate, it could be 10 million that's taxed. So one of the things you could look at is what's called an estate freeze, where it basically says, okay, I've got this value at 5 million right now. I'm going to do a reorganization that freezes that value into a different class of shares that I own. And then I can put the growth shares, so new shares, I can either give those to the next generation or I can put them in a family trust. And what that does is it basically freezes that value at 5 million. So your estate tax bill is frozen in time. So that growth then is passed on to the next generation, which is likely younger and has a lot more time for that to continue to grow. And then you can do things like, I love the wasting freeze. So that's where you actually, as you're getting income through retirement for living expenses out of your company, you're actually grinding down the value of that 5 million. And so ideally, if it's done right, there could be next to nothing taxed in your estate.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So I was wrong. There is ways to do things. I shouldn't say I was wrong. People,
You're never
the
wrong.
some people. Oh, yes, I am. Talk to my wife. So one. So 25 years. Seeing a lot of things. Obviously, business, non-business. Um, what are the biggest pitfalls you see? Like, is there a kind of a top three? That people come see you and it's like, oh my goodness, I see this over and over again. You kind of touched on a few things with the estate or business agreements and stuff, but are there kind of a top three that you seem to see over and over again that people can at least look at their own situation and make sure that they aren't going to fall into those three traps?
Oh, for sure. I'll try and keep it to three.
You can go to five. It's fine.
And honestly, it's usually never about making a single dramatic mistake. It's about small little decisions that quietly compound. And one that I see a lot is, and it's in almost every family, is one of the people, usually the husband, is the financial manager, the CFO of the family. And frankly, men have a shorter life expectancy. And I have seen so many widows and worked with widows who they're a deer in the headlights when something happens. They don't have a clue if there's a plan. They don't know what assets. They've never been involved in the decision making. They're very worried about everything. And so really bring people in, even if they don't want to. I really, really urge clients to make sure the other partner participates in the planning process. Maybe they don't go into all of the investment reviews and things like that, but they need to understand the plan, okay, and know who to contact when something happens. The other thing I see is just not updating your structures. Sometimes I see some very complicated plans that were put in place years and years ago. So you might have, a few holding companies, an operating company, a family trust, but is that still appropriate? Especially as the tax rules have changed surrounding things like passive income in a corporation, things like family trust taxation, tax on split income rules, like CRA is just all over this stuff for the last decade. And so really those do need to be revisited, and it needs to be in conjunction with your professionals. So you've got your financial planner, your investment advisor, your accountant, your lawyer, and maybe they're all doing great, but none of them are talking to each other and making sure that the client is not left trying to piece all of this together. It's really important to coordinate with all of the professionals, and a plan that just never got updated, right? Like life changes. I joke with clients that, look, I'm trying to predict your future and I'm going to be wrong 100% of the time, but we're going to give you a roadmap. And guess what? Sometimes you have to take a left turn. So when you take that left turn and it wasn't in the roadmap, we need to update your plan.
Right. Okay. Nope, that's really good. Really meaty points that people should take away and look at their own situation. So that's good. So I'm going to get you to put on your or whip out, I should say, your crystal ball. So, again, we've both been doing this quite a while. We've seen business change, how, financial plans are being done, how investment management's being done, how tax is evolving, and, the ability for CRA to look at a whole bunch of different ways of doing things. I mean, quite honestly, we're almost to the point where CRA could probably do our taxes for us. Not that we'd want them to, but, they have all the information in real time. So, what with and add into here if you want the movement from large language models, kind of machine learning AI type, to moving now towards a general intelligence, to some would say at some point in the future super intelligence. Where do you see the planning industry or the focus going over the next 2, 3, 10 years?
Yeah, so I'll start on the tax side. Um, CRA has become increasingly aggressive, frankly, on how they look at corporate earnings. And so, a few years ago, they really took a look at, well, if somebody earns income as a salary versus somebody earns that same income in a corporation, why should they pay a different tax rate? And frankly, they're kind of right. The unfortunate part is they haven't really got the math right. So I do see tweaks to that coming, hopefully. But we do have one of the most complex tax regimes in the entire world. I don't know if anybody's seen the Income Tax Act, but it's incredibly thick and incredibly hard to decipher. And so I think that's really where, as clients get more sophisticated, especially if they're a business owner, as they get more sophisticated, it's really about making sure that things are structured to a point that they're paying the least amount of tax, but they're still on side with CRA. The last thing people want is to get reassessed with penalties, interest, etc. Because, and I've seen this, because of aggressive strategies that were put in place by some of their professionals that CRA then challenges. And so that's really where I think the financial planning profession has gone from simply, putting numbers into a software and seeing what it looks like long term. And for some clients, that's all they need. But when you get into clients that have businesses and more complex situations, the financial planner really needs to understand things like tax on split income rules, corporate attribution, income attribution, all of those different things to make sure they're not giving the client advice that could put them offside with CRA. I do think AI, and I hesitate to say this because I know there's quite a backlash on it right now, but I think it's going to make us better and streamline things and increase the capacity of what we can do. What it's not going to be able to do is take those complex issues and tie it to a client situation and have those discussions as a person to person with the client. People still want to deal with people. We've all called the help desk and gotten the AI chatbot and just said representative, representative 20 times because AI isn't going to cut it. And so, as much as I use AI to assist me in just being more efficient and being able to get into some of the weeds of the Tax Act, I definitely enjoy, and I'm glad this won't go away. I enjoy the meeting with the clients. I'm one of those people, you always kind of think, well, what makes you excited and what makes you tired at work? And whatever makes you excited is the stuff you love. And for me, yeah, I love numbers. I love putting things together, but it's that communication with the client. It's taking all of this information and compiling it into something they can understand and communicating it to them. That's the part I really love. And I think the other thing that's changing a lot is the next generation is going to inherit more wealth in the coming years than any generation in the past. It's already underway. And most of them have never actually had a real financial conversation with their parents. And so I am such a proponent of bringing those kids into the conversation when it's age appropriate, just to make sure that they're not going to be blindsided, that they're going to have the tools that they need to navigate the wealth. And an example is I actually have a really good friend who I was just on vacation with and talked to her about, hey, your kids are in their 30s now. They're going to inherit a substantial amount of wealth. And I think you need to bring in somebody that can help get them ready. And so I actually referred it out because they are a friend of mine. But there's great family enterprise advisors out there that's what they specialize in doing, is really preparing that next generation. And yeah, I think that's going to be the big differentiator for families continuing their wealth through generations. I don't know if you've heard the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, right? So
Mhm.
usually wealth is gone by the third generation. And so how can we empower families to not fall into that trap?
Okay, great. Well, we're almost out of time, which, wow, things just flew by. I think, what I took away from this conversation, because there was so much information, people might need to rewatch this a couple of times to get it all, but is you really need a Carmen in your life, is kind of the idea. If you don't have a plan, or don't have a team of professionals that are helping out. And again, if your situation's a little simpler, you don't need an accountant, a lawyer, a planner, an investment advisor. You don't need all the people, but you do need someone that's giving you kind of a third party outlook, or kind of view on things that can point you in the right direction of some of the things you might want to deal with to avoid these pitfalls that we talked about a little earlier. Um, so for anybody listening out there, if from a client side, if you want to meet with Carmen, just let me know. We'll set up a meeting to do a plan. I mean, a lot of you already have a plan, so we're updating that on a regular basis anyway. But if there's also any friends or family, as Carmen said, good friend that needed to talk financial stuff, definitely reach out to us. We do have experts like Carmen, at I don't want to say at our beck and call because she is incredibly busy, but like I said, office next door, makes life a little easier. So if you do have any questions about that, just reach out to myself, Jim, Angela, or Alex, and we're more than happy to point you in the right direction or have a conversation with you or anybody, like I said, a colleague or family member that needs some good advice that people like Carmen can provide. Thank you again, Carmen, and hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thanks so much, Scott. I'll see you next door.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.